Well, did you happen to see the Super Bowl? Now, I'm not going to get into the who's, what's, and where's, except for one thing that caught my attention, and maybe, just maybe, it caught yours. It was during the singing of the national anthem by that young 34-year-old musician, Charlie Puth, I think his name is. A different rendition I'd never heard before, but at the ending, the exact ending of the airplane flyover. How did that flyover happen, and how was it so accurate that the last note of when he was singing, that seven-ship formation came right over the top of Levi Field in Santa Clara, California, to the moment? How did they do that? Well, I'm going to tell you how they did that. See, something like this takes a lot of planning. The actual planning for this particular Super Bowl and the flyover happened a year ago. That's right, because this one was a combination of not just the Air Force flying, it was the Navy flying, and everybody else cooperating to get the entire thing done. It took an entire team. Army, Navy, Air Force, heck, even the Coast Guard. Took everybody to pull this off, but it started a year ago. Now, here's the thing. It was known where the Super Bowl was going to be, and they wanted to have a flyover. So, well, there you got to start contacting the U.S. Air Force. They were the lead player in the game, but they wanted to bring in the Navy. And you have to understand something. When it comes to flying airplanes, the Air Force and the Navy, we talk different. We have different language, different interpretations. What we talk about in the Air Force is flying, formation flying. They don't talk about in the Navy the same way. We're really different. That's our training. That's the way it was done. First thing you got to do is get everybody together. Got the Air Force people together, the Navy people together, and said, we got to learn a language we can both live with. And they did. Now, then you got to say, well, what airplanes are we going to use? Now, normally you use pretty much the same airplanes, a particular type or what have you, because for a standard flyover, it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal for the people down on the ground, but on a Super Bowl, you want to do something really, really spectacular. And boy, did they. So what they put together was, lead airplane was a B-1 Bone. And if you wonder why they call it a bone, take a look at the spelling, B-O-N-E, B-1 Bone. That's the lead aircraft. That was the platform. Then they were adding in the F-15Cs. Where are you going to get those? They got those from the Air National Guard. Yep, that's where those came from. And then they had the FA-18. Who flies those? The Navy. Then they went with the F-35Cs. And those are also from the Navy because those are the Navy versions. But originally, the plan was to use F-22 Raptors. And if you take a look at the patch, here's the patch. This patch was designed a year in advance. This is the patch they wore on the sleeve of the pilots and the aircrew folks. And you'll notice it's got a shape there. It doesn't look quite right. Well, that's because originally they were going to use the F-22s in the particular flyover. But a lot of things happen. Military planes got to go places. They got to do things. And the other thing was they said, well, we can only use these people on training missions that are approved and already set in place. The training missions are out flying. Can't just go up there and say, hey, let's go up and do a flyover and waste people's money. It doesn't work that way. All right, so they spent a year working on this. But here's what they had to do. They had to say, okay, the stadium is right here. Stadium is located in a very, very highly populated area of Northern California, south of San Francisco. And so they got to do, well, bringing all these airplanes together. Now, the B-1 came from Ellsworth out there in South Dakota. You break in the Navy planes from California and also the Guard airplane. Well, all those airplanes had to be brought together in one place, and the pilots have all got to be working together. Our Air Force and Navy, that's a chore, folks, trust me. But they had to lay out a plan. And the plan was, we got to get all these airplanes together at the right time. So what they did was they devised a holding pattern. And the holding pattern started at 10,000 feet. The B-1, the Bone, flew at 10,000 feet in a racetrack pattern, going around kind of like this. Just going around, left-hand turns. And that one line points straight to the stadium, about 3.5 miles away. So they were in this holding pattern. The Bone was at 10,000 feet. And then they bring in the other aircraft. Then you put the 18 at 8,000, the 15s at 6,000, and the 35s at, say, 4,000. Everybody is rotating in a pattern, but they're separated by a couple of thousand feet. So everybody's kind of going together. But when you're getting ready to go, you've got to end up at 1,000 feet AGL. That's 1,000 feet above ground level. Military jets don't like flying at that level. Trust me, unless you're landing or taking off, you don't like doing that. And they also have to figure out what is the speed capability of every aircraft. Every aircraft will stall, and that means they kind of run out of air over the wings, but you got to figure out what speed it'll do that. And once you know that, you're going to say, okay, we can't go below that speed because a certain airplane can't handle that. So they had to find the right number of airspeed to fly. And the platform aircraft in this case was the B-1. So the B-1 set the speed that was determined. Everybody worked it out. Here's the speed we're going to do. And they had to be there at a certain time. All right, because they have a thing called TOT, time on target. That's the time you want to be over that stadium, and that's the crucial part. Now, how do you do that? Well, in this case, you get together with the air traffic control people because they had to clear out the sky in that San Francisco area. So nobody was there. We don't want people running into each other and aircraft running into each other because you've got civilian airplanes flying. The airlines are still flying. So they've got to have people there. And what they did was they had people there in the actual air traffic control center with the controllers sitting right next to them, saying, okay, here's where our planes are. And everybody knew where those planes were going to be. That holding pattern, it's over a mountainous area. And they were circling over that, waiting. But they had a time. They knew the time was going to be there. And then they had another guy in with the producers and the announcers of the ball game. And that guy was sitting there saying, okay, when's the exact time? When are they going to be finished with the national anthem? They had to know that down to the second. Down to the second. And once they knew, okay, it's starting, he's going to sing a certain amount of time, and they had to know how long he was going to sing, and that had been pre-planned out. Rehearsals, everything else, they knew what it was. You got people talking back and forth to the people on the ground, the pilots. You got all sorts of people communicating. Once they gather everybody together, they get there, and they form the formation. And you got 3 on this side, 3 on this side, and you got the bone in the middle, and everybody drops down to 1,000 feet. But there was a little gimmick there, because 2 bones came from Ellsworth, 2 B-1s in case something happened. Well, what happened was once they were ready, once they got the go, and they had the target time, they knew what time. And as they're approaching, they can adjust their speed a few knots here and there. And they called him and said, here's the exact second. They gave him the exact second. They were talking to the pilot. Hey, pilot, it's coming in at this time, plus 10 on the seconds. The pilots knew exactly the second he was going to finish that song. They were relayed to that by the people on the ground were talking to him. And so when you're watching it, there he is, hitting the line of the free, home of the brave, singing the brave, and suddenly all the planes came over. That's what happened, because everybody was talking to everybody, and they knew what was going on. It's a shack. They hit a shack, folks. That's when you put it right on the numbers, right where you have to be. You might have seen the picture of the pilots in the B-1. By the one was a lady, by the way, in case you didn't know. Bump and fist. They got a shack. That's where you put it right on time, right on target, where you have to be. That moment. So they went flying over. Everybody goes, whoa, that's so cool. Right at the end of the song, he went over. And a little something else came up, a little whoopee flight. What was that? Well, about 10 seconds after the flyover, another B-1 came over at 1,000 feet AGL, except he had something different going on. He had all the burners lit up. 4 inches on that plane, and he was powering up, and he was pumping with the burners on. He was flying. 1,000 feet above the ground, burners is awfully loud. And guess what happened in San Francisco, in Santa Clara, California? Car alarms went off all over the place. That's right. Car alarms went off all over the place. Because the sound of the vibration of that B-1 flying over with all 4 burners lit, it lit them up. And that's how it happened. And once they had to get out of there, once they left, you know what they had to do? They had to get fuel. They were out of gas. So you know what they had sitting there waiting for them? Probably a KC-46A. That's sitting there because it can do 2 types of refueling. It can do a boom refueling, out of the things that comes out the back end. That's for Air Force planes. We refuel on booms. The Navy refuels on drogues. Those baskets. They look like baskets. You see the picture. See how it looks. They got the drogue and the drogues for the Navy planes. They work with the drogues, and you can see the KC-46 has that capability, and it also has the boom. So gas was given out. Everybody had to get gas before they go, and wherever they were going, they had to land and get themselves out of their aircraft and to the game itself, because they were PR stuff. That's what you had to do. So if you wondered how that happened last night, now you know. It was all done precisely down to the second. Coordination when the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and everybody else comes together, it takes a year of planning. And that's exactly what it took. And that patch you saw, like I said, patch was created, well, a year ago. Kind of got the wrong aircraft in there, but boy, was it pretty. It's prettier than anything you've ever seen. And that, to me, made the Super Bowl enjoyable. Beyond that, I'll let you folks deal with everything else. But to me, seeing that move and hitting a shack, man, that's what flying's all about. And that's why I'm proud to say that I am a veteran and a longtime veteran, a retiree of the United States Air Force. And I am glad I am. And now you know.